World's Worst Children. Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion. This is the story of the girl who would not sit still. Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion was forever in motion. Whether she was in a lesson, in church, or even playing musical statues, some part of her would always be moving. It might be her foot, or her arm, or even her entire body. It would start with a little wiggle, then become a waggle, before turning into a jiggle, and progressing into a joggle. Next, she would be cartwheeling across the room, creating pandemonium wherever she went. Petulia would even be in motion as she slept. Sometimes the other girls at her posh boarding school, Modesty Place, would hear a noise in the dead of night. They would peek out from under their bed covers and see Petulia ballet dancing across the dormitory with her eyes closed. One day, Petulia's rather grand headmistress announced that the girls of Modesty Place were going to an awfully special trip.
"Quiet, girls!"
ordered the lady as she stood at the stage of the assembly. Mrs. Prigg's grey hair was styled in a magnificent Bonifant hairdo, and a pair of half-moon spectacles hung from her neck on a gold chain. If she was about to tell someone off, which was often, the spectacles would be lifted up to her eyes so she could stare her victim down and give them the willies.
"Now, girls, we are going to take a trip to somewhere I, your beloved headmistress, have chosen myself. We are going to visit my favourite porcelain museum. Needless to say, I expect you to be on your absolute best behaviour. I don't want any mishaps."
Suddenly, all eyes were on Petulia. Oh no, thought the good girl sitting in the front row. Oh yes, thought the bad girl sitting in the back row. To make matters worse, or better, depending on whether you were a good girl or a bad girl, Petulia was bouncing up and down in her seat like a space hopper. Boing, 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 boing.
"Porcelain has long been a favourite personal passion of mine,"
continued the headmistress, who loved making long, lengthy, boring speeches.
"Now I, your beloved headmistress, want to share that passion with all of you. This museum is the best in Europe. Every single piece on display is a priceless antique. There shall be no accidents. Do I make myself clear?"
There was a faint murmur from the pupils.
"I say, do I make myself clear?" "Yes, headmistress,"
chimed the girls in unison.
"Excellent. Now, Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion, I need to see you in my study right away."
The girl glowed as red as a tomato driving a fire engine. What had she done wrong now? Surely the time when she accidentally spun backwards into the science block had been put behind her. Yes, the experiment taking place there that day did go badly wrong. Yes, there was still a huge hole in the floor where the acid burned through it, but Petulia swore it was an accident. Yes, her triple jump on sports day became an octuple jump, taking in 8 different moves, and resulted in Petulia karate kicking the local mayor, sending him tumbling off the winner's podium. But again, the girl insisted it was an accident. And yes, of course, who could forget the time the school Christmas carol concert when Petulia couldn't stand still in the church, cartwheeled up and down the aisle and sent the vicar flying head first into the choir. But all these were all accidents. It wasn't her fault she couldn't sit still. Petulia even had a note from her mother to prove it.
"To whom it may concern, my darling daughter, Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion, cannot stay still for more than a second. It's not her fault. She really must not be punished in any way if she causes damage to property, buildings, people, or animals. Please take care of my darling daughter, yours truly, Petulia's mother.
With some trepidation, the girl knocked at the door of the headmaster's study. Knock, knock, knock.
Come,
Barked the headmistress from inside. Knock, 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 knock. Petulia's hand did not stop knocking.
I said come.
Came an angry sounding voice. Still, Petulia couldn't stop her hand from knocking. Knock, 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 knock.
Oh, for goodness sake,
Roared the headmistress. Miss Prigg yanked open the door, and Petulia knock, knock, knocked the lady slap bang on her nose. Boyoink!
Ow! Sorry, Miss Prigg,
Replied the girl with the hint of a smile. It was amusing to see her, the lady fuming.
Come into my study this instant,
Ordered the headmistress. Petulia forward rolled into the room, which Miss Prigg always kept spotless. In fact, old Cleaner was in there at the very moment, brushily polishing the school trophies on the side table.
You out!
Ordered the headmistress. Miss Prigg was curt to anyone she thought below her. The cleaner picked up her dusters and shuffled towards the door.
Quickly!
Shouted Miss Prigg, and the poor old dear picked up her pace until at last she had disappeared.
Now take a seat, Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion,
said the headmistress. Petulia did just that. She took a seat and danced around the study with it.
I meant sit down,
Barked Mrs. Prigg. The girl whisked and whirled the chair to the floor and slowly lowered herself onto it. As soon as her bottom touched the chair, she felt an overwhelming urge to bounce up and down on it. So she did.
Be still,
demanded Mrs. Prigg, but Petulia continued to bounce up and down, the chair squeaking along rhythmically with her bounces. Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak.
Now, needless to say, I want you on your absolute best behaviour during our school trip. Of course, Miss Prigg, as if I would do anything else. Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak.
The headmistress was not convinced. She lifted her half-moon spectacles to her eyes and studied the girl.
The truth is, you have left a trail of destruction behind you, wherever you've been at Modesty Place, which is the finest girls' boarding school in the country. I hardly need to remind you of the incident in the school lunch hall yesterday lunchtime. You began by juggling huge balls of trifle. Before long, they were zooming through the air, heading straight towards the teacher's table. At least it saved you all from bothering to queue for dessert, headmistress,
replied the little girl. If this was designed to stop Mrs. Prigg becoming further enraged, it failed miserably.
I was covered head to toe in trifle,
boomed the headmistress, her face now boiling with fury, her teeth on the verge of gnashing.
Only this morning I found a piece of jelly in my ear. Did you eat it, miss?
Inquired the girl politely.
No, I did not eat it. Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak.
The noise was really distracting the headmistress now, but she pressed on.
Then there was the time you caused chaos in the art class. You jiggled and wiggled, and before we knew it, there was paint sprayed across the wall, ceiling, and windows. Our art teacher, Mrs. Splurge, remarked that she actually rather liked the redecoration.
The headmistress chose to ignore this smarty-pants reply.
And the time you managed to release all the lacrosse balls from the games cupboard. Miss Heft, your poor PE teacher, wobbled over and was carried down the pitch on a sea of them.
I do hope they eventually find her, remarked Petulia.
I do too,
bellowed the headmistress.
Bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak, bounce, squeak.
Miss Prigg couldn't take it a moment longer.
Will you be still?
She ordered.
Sorry, miss,
muttered the girl, For a moment, Petulia was still, but the moment soon passed. There was a wobble, and then a wibble, ending in a huge wobble. The girl performed a dive roll onto the floor, but before finishing her acrobat's display on a handstand.
Now, Miss Petulia, perpetual motion,
purred Miss Prig, with that hint of menace in her voice.
I need this trip to the Porcelain Museum to pass without incident, or Modesty Place, founded 1,000 years ago by a nun no less, could become a laughing stock.
Of course, miss, said the upside-down girl, who was now scuttling about the headmistress' office on her hands and feet, performing like a poodle.
So, I have ordered Modesty Place's science teacher, Professor Blink, to come up with a contraption to stop you causing any damage to the priceless antiques.
Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion did not like the sound of this at all.
I will be fine without it, but thank you,
said the still upside-down girl, doing scissor kicks. As she spoke, her legs sent a pile of school reports flying off the headmistress's desk. They looked like a flock of seagulls taking flight.
No, you will not,
barked the headmistress.
What is this contraption, miss?
Oh, you'll see, said the headmistress ominously, desperately trying to pluck the sheets of paper out of the air.
Now get out!
With that, Petulia cartwheeled out of the office, booting the newly polished trophies onto the floor as she went.
Crash, bang, wallop!
The day of the school trip arrived, and Professor Blinks proudly wheeled his invention out of the science block and into the playground.
There we are, headmistress,
said the lady still sporting her white lab coat and safety goggles.
Just as you asked. Oh, it's marvelous, Professor,
replied Mrs. Prig.
It looks just like a giant toy for a hamster.
The science teacher had created a huge, round, see-through inflatable ball large enough for somebody to be placed inside. Of course, we all know who that somebody was.
I'm proud to finally unveil my invention,
announced the professor.
I have named it the Bouncing Boom Boom Ball. It's designed to stop jiggling children all over the world from destroying everything in their paths. Keep it brief, ordered the headmistress, who only liked the sound of her own voice.
Yes, yes, headmistress, replied the science teacher hurriedly.
It's very simple. The child who will not stay still will be stuffed in here, she began, indicating a small hatch in the ball. Then, when the child does fidget, the bouncing boom boom ball will simply bounce off any precious object nearby, causing 0 damage.
At least that was the idea.
Splendid, said the headmistress. You may go.
It was a long coach ride to the Porcelain Museum. Despite the driver's protestations, the headmistress insisted that Petulia travel in the boot so she couldn't cause any damage on the way. As soon as they arrived, the headmistress stuffed Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion into the bouncing boom boom ball. Then she led a party of schoolgirls inside the museum as Petulia bounced along, bringing up the rear. Despite her initial reluctance, once inside the bouncing boom boom ball, the girl began to enjoy it. A smile spread across her face. The museum was a treasure trove of all things porcelain. Porcelain dogs, porcelain cats, porcelain plates, porcelain vases, porcelain teapots, porcelain candlestick holders, porcelain. Every single object was an antique and was worth a fortune.
Now, girls, needless to say, this is an absolutely no touching any of the items on display, announced the headmistress. I know most of your mamas and papas are filthy rich. They send you to Modesty Place, after all, which I am proud to say is the most expensive school in the country. However, if you do touch anything and cause it to break, you will have to pay for it yourselves. Every last penny. Does your beloved headmistress make herself clear?
The pupils murmured.
I said, Does your beloved headmistress make herself clear? Yes, headmistress,
replied the girls.
Now gather round.
The girls huddled round the plinth. On it sat a large bowl, with hundreds of tiny flowers, hand-painted around the outside. Petulia bounced up and down in her giant ball, trying to get a better look. Miss Prig raised her half-moon spectacles to her eyes.
This bowl was made in Paris. It once belonged to the last Queen of France, Mary Antoinette, and dates back to the 18th century.
Suddenly, in her eagerness to see, Miss Petulia bounced so hard that her bouncing boom boom ball hit the ceiling. From there, it rebounded, gathering speed at an alarming rate. Now, it was going wham! Up and down, up and down, up and down, shaking the room with its bounce, 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 boom, boom, boom. The headmistress gasped in horror. Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion was bouncing dangerously close to the priceless porcelain pieces. As the bouncing boom boom ball bounced closer and closer, Mrs. Prig stretched out her long, thin arms and gave it a shove. This caused the contraption to start ricocheting off the walls. As all the other schoolgirls watched with their mouths open, it walloped off priceless porcelain without damaging it at all, and then bounced back to the headmistress. Bash! Sending her tumbling into a porcelain penguin posing on a plinth. No! She screamed. The penguin went flying through the air. It was an unusual sight seeing that penguins, of course, flightless birds. But the wonder of seeing such a bird finally taking flight was soon brought to an abrupt halt. The porcelain penguin smashed against a wall. Crash! Shattering into 100 tiny pieces. All the schoolgirls gasped in horror and delight. You'll pay for that! Perpetual motion! Shouted the headmistress. But I didn't touch the priceless porcelain, headmistress. You did, reasoned the girl. Needless to say, this made Miss Prig blaze with rage. She chased after Miss Petulia as the girl bounced off to the other side of the room. Boom! 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 The headmistress raced towards the bouncing boom boom ball, this time with her arms and legs outstretched to stop it. But as it bounced off the wall, it sent the lady flying backwards through the air once more. The first thing she hit was a porcelain statue of a swan. Whack! The second thing, a life-size porcelain statue of a ballerina. Smash! Bang! The third thing she hit was a porcelain statue of a clown. It wasn't one of those happy clowns, it was one of those sad clowns. Sadly, there isn't time to fully explore the clown's emotional state. That's because the sad clown, along with these other objects flying through the air, were soon to be nothing more than a shower of porcelain scattering across the floor. Shatter. At this moment, hearing all of the commotion, the elderly museum director came dashing from his office. He popped his monocle into place and surveyed the damage. Every single piece of priceless porcelain in the museum was in pieces. What is the meaning of this? He bellowed, waving one of the walking sticks off in a hurry. The headmistress wobbled to her feet, crunching porcelain gravel underneath. Crunch, crunch, crunch. I can explain, pleaded the lady. Who touched the precious, priceless, pleasing porcelain pieces? Demanded the museum director. Well, the headmistress glanced over at Miss Petulia, who, to her surprise, was bouncing only very gently in her little plastic ball. Well, technically, it was me, but... No buts, shouted the museum director. Lady, you will pay for every last piece. No, screamed the headmistress. The girl who couldn't keep still smirked. The museum's bill came to many millions. On a headmistress's salary, even at the most expensive school in the country, it would have taken thousands of years for Miss Prig to pay everything back. So she had to take lots of other jobs at Modesty Place. Despite having a very grand woman, the headmistress now had to be up at dawn every morning with a mop and a bucket, cleaning the school corridors. At lunchtime, she would be dishing out soup in the dining hall, and after school most days, Miss Prig could be seen up a ladder, clearing wet leaves and dead pigeons from the guttering. And if there was one person guaranteed to kick over the headmistress's bucket, send the soap flying through the air, or trip over her ladder, it was, of course, Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion. Some years later, it was Petulia's last day at Modesty Place. She was 18 years old now and ready for her somersault off into the world. That morning, the headmistress had been up at dawn unblocking the toilets and had been called to the library to clear up some vomit after the librarian had come down with food poisoning. As Miss Prig angrily plonked down her mop and bucket, she spotted her nemesis, Petulia, sitting in the corner of the library reading a book. The strange thing was that the girl was sitting perfectly motionless. Miss Prig hid behind some shelves of books and spied on her most hated pupil. Apart from turning a page every couple of minutes, Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion did not move a muscle. After an hour of snooping, the headmistress leapt from behind the shelves.
Aha!
Explained the lady.
Gotcha!
Shh! Shushed Petulia, her eyes indicating the sign on the wall that the library said, Silence.
But,
The headmistress couldn't contain herself.
you can sit still if you want to?
Yes, I can, replied the girl.
And I've always been able to. But what about that letter from your mother?
Oh, that silly old thing. About that myself.
100 years of detention!
Bellowed Mrs. Prig.
I'd love to. I really would.
But today's my last day at Modesty Place. And for old time's sake, I'm going to cartwheel out. Farewell, headmistress. With that, Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion leapt onto her hands and spun out of the library, sending every book flying through the air. The headmistress was at the library until midnight, picking up all of the books and putting them back on the shelves. Then she still had to mop up the vomit. So now you know. Miss Petulia Perpetual Motion really was one of the world's worst children.